Hello and welcome to episode 944 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I am one of the co-founders here at ETR, and we are coming off of the best ball regular season is over kind of week. Yes, that's right. I spent yesterday, Sunday, not really paying too much attention to my DFS teams, which is quite rare. Instead, I spent Sunday on my hands and knees begging for some of my high stakes best ball teams to hold on to playoff spots or sneak into the playoffs. Best ball is such a weird thing in that we spend so much time in the summer talking about it, writing about it, drafting teams. And then once the season starts, there's literally nothing to do but sweat it. But man, I mean, there's just so much money up for grabs at the end. It is an insane sweat, a fun sweat. This season, I was in for $19,372 in on-screen best ball action across 155 drafts. And honestly, I'm pretty happy with my advancement rate results. Basically, all the best ball stuff that I'm in is 2 of 12 advance. So 12 people in a draft, top 2 advance by point total only. So the average expectation is to advance 16.7% of your teams. Heading into Monday night, I'm advancing 25.5% of my teams on DraftKings. That includes the $3,000 buy-in. Only did one draft in that tournament. More on that in a second, but that one is advancing. Also includes the tournament I concentrated the most on, which was the $555 buy-in on DraftKings. I put 19 entries into that 555. I'm advancing 6 right now. Could be as many as 8 after tonight's Eagles-Chargers game. Could be down to 5. Either way, even if I only get 6, that's a 31.6% advance rate. Really, really happy with that in the 555. But yeah, my best spot is in the 3K because it's small field and the advancements from here on out are relatively easy. You know, you get 5K for making the playoffs. Okay, great. Now there are 3 groups of 8 left. You need 2 of 8. So 25% of people are going to advance here out of week 15, get to week 16. In week 16, there's only 6 people left, 3 advance to the final. And then in the 3-person final, payouts are 150K to first, 80K to second, 67K to third, keeps going down from there. And from a macro perspective, the structure of that 3K team that I drafted is roughly the structure that I thought was best this season. I mean, I know people got sick of me talking about it. I talked about it so much over the summer, but I started running back with Saquon Barkley and Chase Brown. Then I took 6 wide receivers between rounds 3 and 9, took 3 later round tight ends in Njoku, Goddard, and Gesicki, and then took the Flyers late at running back. So barbell at running back. Later, I took Tootin, Rashad White, Tyler Algier, Kyle Monangai. So I think one of the reasons that I did well this year on advance rate was that macro structure I preferred was correct. You know, as talked about all summer, when comparing the round 3 to round 8 running backs versus the round 3 to round 8 wide receivers, it's not even close, especially in full PPR best ball format. I thought in that range, the wide receivers were way better. Whereas the round 1 and round 2 running backs versus round 1 and round 2 at other positions, well, that was close, but I even preferred the running backs there by a pretty decent margin, especially the round 2 ones. And then continuing on with this structure idea, ideally 3 mid-round quarterbacks, 3 mid/late round tight ends. I thought that was mostly right this year. And so if that was a structure you focused on, I think you did well. Even, you would just run into some huge hits at quarterback. Like I didn't love Sam Darnold or Matthew Stafford or Daniel Jones or Jackson Dart, but just in the structure that I was doing, I ran into those guys a lot on backdoor stacks and some front door stacks and even some one-offs. So the macro thing was like really good. And then on micro, well, if you leaned into running back in round 1, you probably got a lot of Bijan, Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, you got Saquon Barkley too, which has been rough. But for the most part, that round 1 group of running backs has been good. And then if you leaned into that round 2 group that I talked about so much, the round 2 bucket of running backs, Derrick Henry, Achan, Chase Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving. Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but that group was a smash in the aggregate too, especially Achan and JT, and especially early in best ball when all the slappies and the wide receiver freaks were taking wide receivers over that round 2 group. You could get a lot of those guys in round 3, which I did. So even though I ran into a mediocre start in the 3K, Saquon first, he's fantasy's RB17 on the season, not great. And then Chase Brown, he's fantasy's RB12. Even though that was one of the worst RB starts possible, almost every other RB start combination was better. That structure led me to Jackson Smith and Jigba in round 3, Devontae Adams in round 4. I would not have taken those guys if I needed running back there. And then the late running back hits that I already mentioned, Rachaad White, Algier, Monangai got me there too. So if you go back to episode 924 of the show, it's a solo pod where I talked about best ball at the halfway point. I talked much more about the round 2 stuff there and things I would have done differently around Chase Brown. Definitely, please check that out if you're trying to think about best ball on a bit deeper level. But honestly, man, my real feeling is this better be my fucking year to win something big, because not only was my most common roster structure right in terms of results, but I also hit on a lot of micro takes. Obviously missed a ton also, but my most drafted player in 555s in those 19 555 buy-ins, my most drafted player was easily George Pickens at an average cost of 57.8, like end of round 5. And Pickens finished the regular season as the wide receiver 3 behind only JSN and Puka. Just a massive hit. My most drafted running back was Algier at an average pick of 165. He finished as the running back 35 with a ton of usable weeks. Similarly, Rachaad White was among my most drafted running backs, ton of usable weeks, in part due to the Bucky injury, obviously. But yeah. Now, that said, a point I wanted to make is that in best ball, and really any fantasy format, getting the fades right is really important as well. In terms of expensive rookie running backs, I only took 4.7% Genti on DraftKings, only 6.6% Trevion Henderson, only 3% Caleb Johnson. I did take 10.4% Hampton, but only 3.8% Kyron Williams, 5.7% Mike Evans, had literally 0 Marvin Harrison, literally 0 Cooper Kupp, 3% Kamara, 3% Sutton, 4% Burrow, 1.9% DK Metcalf, 2% Kelsey, 2% Bo Nix, 3% Keon Coleman, 0% Nick Chubb. Obviously had a couple bad fades. I only had 2.8% of Javonte Williams, for example, but you get the point. Like, fades are really, really important. And shout out to our rankings, and shout out to me, aka my brain is the sim, did well on avoiding the right guys this year. So, I had some good hits in terms of targets, had some really, really, really good fades. I definitely did better on fades than I did on hits. And then had the structure, better win. I mean, better win something this year. This is the year. One point on the fades that I wanted to make. Some people will say, some best ball bros will say, hey, you should just have balanced exposures. Make the best team that the board gives you in drafts. And maybe that's right for some people, flat exposures across the board. I think it's important in any kind of peer-to-peer gambling game to know and identify where your edge is. And for me, in best ball drafting, I think I have a pretty big edge in player takes, who to target, who to fade. That's kind of the whole point of that Market Monday show I do all summer. And this summer I did the Levitan's player notes thing, just gave my take on literally every player all summer. And yeah, I'm not always going to be right, but I think on player takes, but I think over a big enough sample, me drafting with relatively strong player takes instead of just trying to have flat exposures, I think that's right for me. I think in the long run, I'll win. I'll certainly have bad years. I think in the long run, I'll win. Anyway, as we now turn to the best ball playoffs, it's a reminder of how fast things can change. Jonathan Taylor was the best pick you could have made this entire year, but he's going to be so owned in the best ball playoffs and now has to go to Seattle with Riley Leonard at quarterback here in week 15. Of course, he could still hit. Of course, he could still have a big game, but I'm actually hoping that my advancing teams don't have Jonathan Taylor. And that concept is why I'm so hopeful. optimistic, praying, have full 3.9 inches for this 3K team. I don't think many people advance with Saquon. I have some wide receivers who I don't think will be that owned. Adunze, if he can play, Addison, Shakir, Mooney. I have Gesicki, who just got back to health and now has Burrow. I have a Hertz Goddard stack, which shouldn't be too owned. Where I am not thrilled with my team heading to the playoffs in the 3K, and it's the reason I try to get 3 quarterbacks on all my teams. It's not really for the regular season, it's for the playoffs. I want to give myself access, ideally, to 3 different stacks going off each week of the playoffs. So on this 3K team, I didn't want to take elite quarterback, but Jalen Hurts fell all the way to 54th overall, middle of round 5, and I just couldn't pass on the value there. And then I tried to push it at quarterback, got caught, and ended up with only Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson as backups. So now with both Dimes and A-Rich hurt, I only have Jalen Hurts at quarterback for the playoffs in this 3K. And maybe that's okay in this ultra small field. But for more normal formats, it's just so unlikely that the Hurts stack, Jalen Hurts stacks go off for 3 straight weeks. And if it does go off, let's say in week 15, well, then I'll probably be duped with a lot of other Hurts stacks in week 16. And I don't have anything else at quarterback. So yeah, pretty frustrated with losing Dimes there in the 3K. I just didn't do a good enough job getting 3 quarterbacks there. Even a Jackson Dart or a Tyler Shuck would make a difference here. And I actually did take those guys, Dart and Shuck, a lot on DraftKings as quarterback 3, just not in that draft. And by the way, if you want to see the full board from the 3K, you can scroll back on my Twitter to December 2nd. Anyway, I know I've gone too long on this. I just really do love best ball. Drafting is my favorite thing to do in the summer. It's my favorite thing to talk about. I'll probably do a thread on Twitter showing some of my boards, try to make some more takeaways from this season. I'll show some of my high stakes teams that are still alive as we move on here in the playoffs in case anyone cares. But yeah, I mean, I could talk about this stuff all day. I find best ball, the macro and the micro strategy so fascinating. Good luck to everyone in the playoffs. Huge good luck. Unless you're in my group, in which case I hope all your players pull a hamstring in practice this week. Real quick on the week 14 DFS slate. Well, the only thing that I wanted to talk about is just it's so clear that weather stuff is a huge edge in DFS tournaments. Yeah, in cash, I think sometimes the risk isn't worth taking on. I think sometimes weather risk isn't worth taking on. In cash on DraftKings, I went from Trevor Lawrence to Jaden Daniels this week on the weather scare, on the rain scare. I thought it was close anyways between those guys. Went to the guy in the dome, paid the price as Jaden got hurt and played really poorly. But I think that was fine. I don't have a problem with that. My bigger point is in tournaments. The weather FUD is just so absurd. I've been talking about this for like 10 years, but it just does not matter as much as people think it does. All 5 games on Sunday that had rain, snow, cold, they all went over the total. And in a few cases, way over the total. So we put mild docs on for certain weather things in our projections, mainly sustained winds nearing 20 miles an hour and steady, heavy rain. But then people go and double count that stuff. And so you get things under-owned in tournaments because of weather nonsense. So yeah, just something I'm going to try to keep in mind down the stretch here if we get another slate where weather is a theme. All right. Need to get to listener questions, but before I do, if you have the Establish the Run Best Ball product, playoff-only best ball contests are live, as are our rankings for those formats. Please read Herzig's strategy article on playoff-only best ball before diving in. It's very important for this format. And also, you can upload our rankings from ETR, find them in the NFL menu. You can upload those rankings straight to Underdog or DraftKings. Again, you will need the ETR Best Ball product. I believe it's only $50 right now for 12 months. Also, NBA remains in full swing. If you're interested in playing DFS or betting props, head to the NBA tab on establishtherun.com. All right, enough is enough. It is time for everyone's favorite portion of the program, the listener questions. Question 1 comes from Nikki Checkmark. He says, what do you feel is the perfect setup for a competitive home league? Draft type, full versus half PPR, 10 teams, 12 teams, 14 teams? How many flex spots? Any roster or rule changes? How many bench spots? Number of playoff spots, etc.? Any and all thoughts appreciated. Yeah, good question, Nikki Checkmark. I think the most important thing is making sure everyone stays involved and is grinding literally the entire season, all the way through week 17. And so I don't want to hear about some stupid last place, quote unquote, punishment like eating a lot of waffles or wearing a bikini to the draft or whatever mind numbing nonsense people do as punishments. When I talk about a punishment, I'm talking about cash, money, stuff that people actually care about. The only way, in my opinion, to have a truly successful season long league is to make it a big penalty for finishing last. And also a biggish penalty for finishing second to last. And also a smaller, yet still solid cash penalty for finishing third to last. All the other stuff that Nikki Checkmark asked about, size of the league, format, it's all just noise. It's all meaningless unless people are on the message board, making trades, grinding the wires, setting their lineups, talking shit to other people. So one other thing that I would say, I guess that's important is you don't want to make it so the format only favors certain people. Like in a 16-team league, that will disproportionately favor people who have 0 sex, subscribe to ETR, are on fantasy football Twitter all day. If you have an entire league of virgins, that's great. But if you don't, then a 12-team league or a 10-team league might be better for you. The only thing I'd say on format, I do think auction is a more fair way to draft. It gives everyone the chance to get whoever they want, and anyone can build with any structure they want. And I also think that there should be a pretty big regular season prize for most points scored so that people don't feel it all comes down to just playoff luck and running hot on schedule distribution and stuff like that. But yeah, big thing is just make sure everybody's engaged to week 17 and you'll have a great league. Hope that helps. Nikki Checkmark. Question 2 from Cole says, Adam, I just turned 29 years old. Lately, feel like DFS, hyper gambling in the stock market, poker at the casino, crypto perps is really the only way to survive, given how obliterated the dollar has become and how fucked our economy is. What advice can you give on staying balanced? Yeah, so Cole, I'm not an economist. I haven't put my 10K hours or anything close in on inflation, tax policy, housing, or anything of the sort. So I don't really want to comment on all that. I'm honestly pretty tired of people pretending to be experts because they saw some TikTok or some Insta reel or because they read some article and they have some take. If you put your 10K hours in on a very niche subject such as inflation and it has zero to do with what you've seen on social media, then yeah, I'd like to hear from you. Otherwise, I wouldn't. But what I can say is, I think just from being a human alive, I do think that what Cole is saying is what a lot of young people are feeling. The cost of living is rising faster than wages are rising. And that's not good. I get it. And so it's just standard to have a side hustle. But honestly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that's anything new. Everyone I knew when I was in my 20s, if they were ambitious people, we all had side hustles. Of course. I mean, if you're not fucking grinding your cock in your 20s and 30s, then you're not trying hard enough. I hate to do when I was young, I walked 10 miles through the snow, but I lived with roommates for my entire 20s. I worked on Friday and Saturday nights at a newspaper. I eat cheese sandwiches. I don't think that's anything new. I mean, is it? Maybe it is. I don't know. I think the difference these days is like, even if you're doing well with your job and you're doing well with your side hustle, well, there are a lot of places in our country now where it's just still too expensive, still can't live. And that's not everywhere, I want to be clear, but in a lot of the most desirable places. Now, what scares me about Cole's question is that young people trying to do gambling as their side hustle, most will fail. Most aren't good enough. Most don't understand what it takes to win. Most just won't put any work in because I know ball or whatever bullshit they say, and they'll just start firing. I was fortunate that when I was young, I had this dream, goal, desire to work in sports. I was basically making no money. I couldn't live, but I had poker to help me get by. And I was trying really, really, really hard at it. Um, my wife had a side hustle, not poker, but she was a waitress at Chili's and other restaurants in addition to her regular job. I consider that a side hustle as well. My friend was a caddy for golfers on the weekend. That's a hustle. But yeah, this feeling that young people have that they're just drawing dead economically, which I think is, partly true, partly a function of the poison that is social media and bullshit posts of fake people and fake rich people and their fake lives. It doesn't matter though. The fact that people have that feeling is definitely a problem. And people turning to SGPs, trying to turn $20 into a zillion. Yeah, it's not good. So anyway, Cole asked for advice. I guess my advice is to find a lifestyle and a place that works for you where you are not under financial pressure. When I was in my 20s, I wanted to live in Manhattan. That wasn't practical. I didn't have enough money. I wasn't making enough money. So I lived in Philly. If you want to live in Manhattan or LA or San Francisco or Newport Beach or Aspen or whatever, you better fucking get into banking or tech or something that pays really well. Maybe that's a hard take. But yeah, all I know for sure is that hundreds of thousands of young people turning to SGPs and touchdown parlays, it's going to be a very expensive lesson. Let's put it that way. It's going to be a very, very expensive lesson. Maybe an important lesson, but an expensive lesson. Question 3 from Del Boca. He says, as someone who has said they're obsessed with making sure they get the best line shopping, do you find yourself obsessed with line shopping in real life, food, clothing, etc.? Yeah, I thought about this question for a little, Del Boca. It's actually the opposite. I value my time so much more than saving X dollars. So no, I wouldn't sit around and clip coupons or drive an extra 3 minutes to save $1 on gas. I'm basically willing to at least consider any money for time trade with a heavy bias towards the time side. Also, I think the distinction in my head is if you try to live your entire life as just always trying to get it in as only the best shape possible, it's not really going to lead to a happy life. But when I'm, quote unquote working, aka trying to make money, not spend money, then yeah, I have to get it in good. And especially because it's so easy in sports. Like if you're going to bet on sports, which I really don't recommend anyone does, but if you are going to bet on sports, it's so simple to just have money on multiple books, 3 books, 5 books, 7 books, whatever, and always get the best price. It takes 5 seconds to shop it. There's a million odd screens out there. Speaking of multiple books, if you live in the state of Missouri, where sports betting was just legalized, head to the props tab on establishtherun.com. Look for the ETR Sportsbook bonus offers bet. Find Missouri your state. Get your bonus for signing up. Again, I never recommend people bet on sports unless you really know what you're doing. But if you are, taking advantage of bonuses plus price discrepancy is just a must. So yeah, check that out. Anyway, I'm not sure that helps, Del Boca, but I think we as humans need to be capable of bucketing thoughts and philosophies. Like when I'm playing peer-to-peer games, I'm going to fucking grind and get it in as good as I possibly can. But when I'm not playing peer-to-peer games, when I'm in my normal life, I'm going to optimize for other things like fun and health and time, etc. All right, question 4, last question we're going to do today. Actually, 2 people submitted a very similar question. Sam Bowers said, any tips for getting my wife to tolerate the sheer volume of football I watch each week? I don't need her to watch with me or be a fan, but she is definitely annoyed at the total hours per week I'm parked in front of the TV sweating, aka living. And Brookstruck asked, hi Adam, any tips for how to make my wife happy during the week so she doesn't get mad when I lay on the couch Saturday and Sunday to watch football? I also spend most of my free time during the week golfing or watching ball, so that doesn't help. She's been taking away sexy time as a discipline to my football addiction. I mean, my God, Brooks, let's try not to use the term sexy time, But anyways, he says, I'm okay with losing sexy time because I'm basically a virgin during football season, but I don't want her being mad at me during the week? Is it time to limit my hobbies? So, my God, I mean, I get so many questions like this from people. I should honestly be a marriage counselor at this point. That's how many questions I get like this. Although I wouldn't make very much money as a marriage counselor because my services would only take one session. Honestly, it wouldn't even take a full session. It would take about 5 minutes. I would listen to all of their problems. I would listen to what are their names here again? I would listen to Sam and Brooks's problems, all this complicated or seemingly complicated relationship stuff. And then I'd simply say to the woman, you need to have the sex at a much higher rate. Like, we need your cock per breast taken. We need that metric at like a 1-to-2 ratio. So I'd say that to the woman. And then I'd turn to the husband and I'd say, listen, you need to help around the house more. You need to take the kids. You need to do some dishes. You need to clean a little. And that's it. Boom. Marriage problem solved. Easy game. But really, the point that I'm trying to make is you got to feel like you got to make her feel like you're on the same team. I know that's not always easy, but life is hard. And I think a lot of people, women specifically, want to feel like you're fighting through life together. It can't be, there's this football thing. It's my thing. I'm watching everything Thursday, Monday, Sunday, 1 p.m., 4 p.m., and you can get fucked. That's just not going to work. There's also this whole circular logic thing that I think grips a lot of people and a lot of couples. She might be thinking, well, why should I fuck him? He can't even put his dishes in the sink. He can't even help the kids take a bath. And at the same time, he's thinking, why should I put the dishes in the sink? Why should I help the kids take a bath? She won't even fuck me. And so I think just being aware of that dynamic as you're watching your 1000th hour of Laundry Bro games for the week, I think being aware of that kind of circular logic might help. Oh, by the way, guys, that will be $500 each for my marriage counseling services. Thank you all. Please remit payment ASAP. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of the Solo Pod. For anyone with in-season product, first round of projections for week 15 will be out by Wednesday night. Be sure to check out the NBA tab as well, both DFS and props going on there. Back with Silva Tuesday evening for team by team. For producer Luke, for Jerry, the most beautiful beast in the world, for everyone behind the scenes at ETR, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.